One of the games that came out about 5 years ago, but I'm excited to see how it looks and runs on the Nintendo Switch 2. And for the bigger, I would say, implications behind it is Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. This game is coming over to the Nintendo Switch 2 in January 2026, and the director for the game has been doing a ton of interviews and discussions and talking about it, and I truly feel that this is pretty much the turning point for Final Fantasy. At least that's what Square Enix wants it to be, because they see what is happening in Japan. We are seeing what is happening, and this is the reason why they're going so hard with the interviews, giving people hands-on, letting them play and see the Nintendo Switch 2 version, is because they really want that to be one of the dual homes of Final Fantasy going forward in the future. We saw recently in the Japanese sales with the core Japanese game like Digimon Story Time Stranger, it only sold around 23,000 copies in Japan at launch. You compare that to some of the other games that have came out on the Nintendo Switch 1 or even Switch 2 from Japanese developers, significantly better overall. So a lot of Japanese developers are seeing what happens when you don't actually put your game on the Nintendo Switch 1 or Switch 2 with certain core RPGs or games. Now let's get into what Mr. Naoki Hamaguchi had to say, because he had a lot when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade on the Nintendo Switch 2. One of the things that he wanted to make sure would happen when it comes to Nintendo players was make sure that they feel comfortable that they're going to get a great experience with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in addition to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 on the Nintendo Switch 2, because they have already confirmed that it is coming over. But there's a lot of questions, especially considering how the game launched back in 2024 on the PlayStation 5 and how it ran. There are concerns about how it's going to be on the Nintendo Switch 2. So here's what Mr. Hamaguchi had to say about that. Nintendo players in the future, you really don't need to worry at all. They're going to get a version that is just as satisfying and just as high quality as the first game, if not higher. So definitely good to see that. If you're looking at it from a review standpoint, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did review higher than Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, but we have to wait and see exactly how the Nintendo Switch 2 version is going to shape up. But I do expect it to be a high quality game. FF7 Remake, FF7 Remake Intergrade, that DLC content, and FF7 Rebirth are some of the best rated RPGs coming out from Japan in a while. So it's good to see that they want to keep up that level of quality. And once again, I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how it's going to run and look. But if they do as good as the job that they did as Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, we have nothing to worry about when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, in addition to Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. All right, there was another thing here that Mr. Hamaguchi talked about, and that was being very proud of the work that they did with the Nintendo Switch 2 hardware, saying this: I would say that we're confident that of all the games currently on Switch 2, we've probably reached the highest point in terms of graphical quality combined with a stable frame rate. I think that at the moment, we're number one in that, and I'm very proud. It was a big success from all the hard work that the team has done. Now, obviously, he's probably a little bit biased overall because it's his work, but yeah, I have to sit there and say it's definitely up there with some of the other games. If you look at Cyberpunk 2077, that game's graphical quality is pretty good, but the frame rate can be a little bit sketchy at times, especially with the Phantom Liberty DLC. You look at the next game that people talk about, and that is Star Wars Outlaws. That is probably the best in terms of graphical fidelity. I would say the loading assets of the world, the amount of time that it takes to get into things, the menus, like the latency, in addition to the frame rate being a stable 30. More stable than what we saw when it comes to Cyberpunk overall. So I would say when it comes to graphics in addition to stability, I would say that Star Wars Outlaws is the best. Now, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade isn't out yet, but if you're looking at from what we've seen so far, it looks really good. It looks around the PlayStation 5 level in terms of visual quality, but it's running at 30 FPS instead of the 60 FPS. But you're getting better quality than what you'd see like on PlayStation 4 Pro, for example. You're getting a little bit better quality than that from what we've seen so far. We have to wait till Digital Foundry tears it apart and everything like that with the final release. But I would say, yeah, that game is right up there when it comes to best looking and stable performance overall. It's right up there with Star Wars Outlaws. It's up there with Cyberpunk and some of the other major third-party titles that have came over to the Nintendo Switch 2 so far. So I think that he, once again, is a bit biased when it comes down to it, but I don't think he's necessarily completely wrong based off of what we've seen. Now for the next part here, Mr. Hamaguchi had something very interesting to say when it comes to what influenced Final Fantasy VII Remake, the trilogy, the most. And he says that it's The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. He did go on to say that he felt that it was a little bit of a cop-out saying that, but truly, Breath of the Wild did inspire him when it comes to making a game. He said that it was incredibly inspirational and that he learned a lot from it, and it affected the Remake series, going from Remake to Rebirth and going to a more open-ended areas to where you can explore and do different things, whereas FF7 Remake was definitely more, I would say, linear when it comes to where you can explore and what you can do. Breath of the Wild was apparently hugely influential there. I have to kind of sit back and say, okay, when you look at it that way overall, because Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, both of those are very different in terms of their structure and opening things up and having that open space to explore and kind of do different things. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of a caveat there when it comes to what FF7 Rebirth does compared to Breath of the Wild and the interactivity with the world, but still, I do see where he's coming from that. And I do feel that Nintendo fans are going to support the Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy when it comes down to it, just because having that quality of RPG anywhere that you want, even though it's going to be 30 instead of 60, I think it's going to be worth the trade-off for many Japanese gamers out there. I think a lot of Japanese gamers were probably even waiting for this to happen when it comes with the Nintendo Switch 2. So what do you guys think about everything here when it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade for the Nintendo Switch 2? There was a lot there. You can let me know in the comment section. But before we move on to the next topic, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are someone new, and click that notification bell to get my videos as soon as they drop. And drop a comment below on what Japanese RPG you're most excited for when it comes to potential on the Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, let's go and get into the next topic here, because we're going to be talking about a big update when it comes to Baldur's Gate 3 potentially dropping on the Nintendo Switch 2. Shoutouts to Nate the Hate, reliable insider. He's put out a lot of information that ends up being correct, from Nintendo Direct dates, heck, to even the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal timing itself. Nate the Hate got that right. So I want to talk about this just a bit, because on Twitter, he didn't want to give an update on Red Dead Redemption 2, but he did state that he has heard something on Baldur's Gate 3 for the Switch 2, but he needs more time for verification before he can share anything. And I wanted to talk about this because this was something that people were asking for, like, hey, could we potentially see a Baldur's Gate 3 on Nintendo's successor back when it was just that, or the Nintendo Switch 2? People were even dubbing it Nintendo Switch 2 back then. And yeah, I think it's definitely possible, because if you look at the Nintendo Switch 1, Larian supported that system. They supported it with old school Baldur's Gate, in addition to Divinity Original Sin coming over as well. So since they put that out on there, and they clearly had some struggles overall with getting that to run and look the way that it did, but ultimately ended up turning out to be a pretty good port of the game, I do think that they are going to take the time, or even team up with another studio to kind of get something together when it comes to a Nintendo Switch 2 version of Baldur's Gate 3. And there's really nothing to lose overall. They already made a lot of money when it comes to the game on the PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, selling in the tens of millions of units. So I would expect them to say, hey, we can expand things a little bit more and have a true blue portable version of Baldur's Gate 3 when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. And I think they talked about this just recently about how they optimize things specifically for the Steam Deck overall, so people can comfortably play that game on a portable device. So I do expect them to put something out on the Nintendo Switch 2 and to have a good hybrid version of the game to where you can play it anywhere that you want, in addition to easily being able to dock it and play it on your TV and have it almost instantaneous. I think that's what a lot of Switch players like. It's the fact that you can easily go from the TV to portable without having to sync the cloud, without having to drop one device and go to another device and do all that type of stuff. It's just so seamless and it's so easy in order to get it done. So I think that that's the reason why people would want to have that option on the Nintendo Switch 2. And if they can put cross progression and cross play type of stuff and all that, I think that would even be better when it comes down to it, which I think they might have, don't quote me on it, but they might have had that for Divinity Original Sin. So what do you guys think about Baldur's Gate 3 potentially coming over to the Nintendo Switch 2? You can let me know in the comment section below. All right, and getting into the final topic here, we're going to discuss a game that I'm really excited for, and that is Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. We've got a new trailer, and it's called Unite Against the Demon King. And this is great because this is kind of the lead up to Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment when it comes to the marketing for this game. It's coming out on November 6th, so it's just going to be like a couple weeks here, and we're going to get our hands on this game. So let's get into what Nintendo had to say about this most recent trailer for the title. So publisher Nintendo and Koei Tecmo developer AAA Games Studio have released a brand new trailer for Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, dubbed Unite Against the Demon King. In Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment game for the Nintendo Switch 2 system, the fate of the ancient Hyrule hangs in the balance. Stand alongside Princess Zelda as Demon King Ganondorf's dark forces sweep across the kingdom and witness the beginning of this previously untold chapter of Hyrule's history that ultimately leads to the events of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, in Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, King Rauru and Princess Zelda must lead a desperate defense against an invasion that will determine the fate of the kingdom. The very survival of Hyrule and its people rests on the courage of heroes willing to stand together against Ganondorf's legion. You'll meet various characters within the story, including some new faces like Kalamo, a boisterous Korok wandering Hyrule in search of a place to put down roots, and the mysterious Construct who can transform and take to the skies, that mysteriously looks and acts kind of like Link. You'll also encounter familiar figures during your adventure alongside Princess Zelda. Players will also get to know the legendary sages. To defend the kingdom, these heroes must form a united front against Ganondorf's invasion. By having two characters work together, you can unleash powerful sync strikes to give yourself an edge in combat. Different character combinations will produce different kinds of sync strikes, such as granting characters buffs or creating constructs you can control. Try out different pairs and deliver devastating blows to the opposition. So rally your allies and use their signature abilities to vanquish hordes of enemies when Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment launches. The game is coming out on the Nintendo Switch on November 6th. There will be no Nintendo Switch 1 version of the game. This is Switch 2 only, and I really like that because this game actually started out as a Nintendo Switch 1 game, and they realized that things probably aren't going to go so well with what we want to do. And when they found out about the Nintendo Switch 2, they immediately moved the game from Switch 1 to Switch 2, and that's why you're seeing a smooth, silky 60 frames per second target, in addition to much better resolution than what we saw on Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity on the Nintendo Switch 1, and that's the biggest thing here. This was a welcome move to Nintendo Switch 2 so they can actually get the look and feel and the combat, the potential that we saw with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, but the terrible frame rate at times really put a damper on trying to play that game. I still enjoyed it. I still felt that it was great, but I couldn't manage it for the DLC. The DLC came out and I was like, okay, cool. I love this game. I'm going to get back into it. And I'm just like, oh man, this game is just moving like really bad at times. So I just said, I'm not going to put myself through that again. I'll wait for a Switch 2 version, or I'll wait for the next one. I'll do something, but I'm not going through all of this when it comes down to it. So I'm really happy that they actually got it here, and Nintendo put together a system that can be able to hand something like Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment at good resolution, good frame rate, and actually improve the graphical fidelity of the game, because while it does look similar, and you can tell that, yeah, they were starting out for the Switch 1, it does look graphically superior in terms of the details and the models and everything. So that was definitely a nice upgrade, and the environments too look really good. Draw distance looks pretty good. So overall, they've improved numerous aspects of this game. The Switch 2 has plenty of power to make sure that they can get the job done with this, and it just looks like it's going to be so much fun. And while I love Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I love Tears of the Kingdom, and I love Age of Calamity to a degree, obviously the frame rate there, I think that having this last game to kind of round out the whole story of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, this is a fitting end to it, because I think the next Legend of Zelda game is going to go in a completely different art style, a completely different direction, and it's going to be very different from what we saw on the Nintendo Switch 1 and the Nintendo Switch 2 with the Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild re-releases, and of course with Age of Imprisonment here. I think it's going to look very different, so I think this is going to be an iconic type of saga to end off in with this art style and this story and everything. But this is the last one for it, and it's going to be super fun to see what they do next when it comes to the Legend of Zelda series. But absolutely, man, I'm excited to get into this game, and the sync strike stuff looks pretty cool too, so looking forward to that. So what do you guys think when it comes to everything that we talked about here, from Hyrule Warriors to Final Fantasy and more? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.